This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today's topic is Every Traveller's Scared Sometimes. I'm going to be talking all about fears and confidence. I think it's often a surprise to people that every traveller does get scared, and not necessarily about scary things like being chased by a bear, but about some of the more mundane aspects of travel. And I think we need to talk about it some more. I know I'm always surprised to hear that other travellers have some of the fears that I do, but it does make me feel a whole lot better. So I'll start off with a confession. So in my late teens, early 20s, I really struggled with some anxiety problems. I spent a few months pretty much locked in my bedroom, anxious about anything in the world. But as that got better, I did sort of begin to wonder if I would ever be able to travel anywhere again, because travelling involved a lot of things that I was quite scared of. Getting on a plane, trying to find my way in a strange city, meeting new people where I couldn't speak the language, all kinds of things that I thought in these sort of depths of anxiety that I could probably never ever do again. Although I have to say the very worst part was the idea of getting on an aeroplane. I don't know if some of you can relate. In fact, I'm sure some of you can relate, but an aeroplane is one of those places where you just have no control. Like a bus or a train or something, you can sometimes at least get off. But an aeroplane, you're really stuck there and you can't do anything about it, and you just have to trust that pilot, and that's all you can do. So I find still today aeroplane travel kind of freaky. But back in those days, I thought, there's no way I can get on a plane. How am I ever going to travel anywhere? I live here in Perth, the most isolated city in the world, and if I want to travel anywhere significantly, then I do need to get on a plane. What am I going to do? And the thing about travel-related fears is that it's not something you can kind of do every day. So I kind of found it easier to overcome some anxiety about everyday things. Like I found it hard for a while to drive on fast roads like on our freeway. But that's something you can practice bit by bit. You can do a little bit every day, that kind of repeated exposure idea, and eventually it becomes less scary and you can do it again. But unless you're someone far richer than me, you can't go travelling every day. You can't just hop on a plane just to get you used to it again. So I really knew that flying was the biggest barrier to me travelling again, but for some reason travelling was still really important to me. So I remember very distinctly the first time that I flew again after suffering from all these anxiety issues. And it was actually a mystery flight, which I don't think they do anymore, but back in the day, I guess 20 years ago, you could get a $99 mystery flight from Perth to somewhere else in Australia, and they wouldn't tell you where that was until you rocked up at the airport in the morning, usually really early in the morning. And back then, I suppose flights to the East Coast were still really expensive, so this was one way to spend actually only a day or less than 24 hours somewhere on the East Coast, or sometimes somewhere else in Western Australia for for a much cheaper price than usual. So anyway, I remember we got to the airport very, very, very early in the morning and discovered that our mystery flight was off to Sydney, which is pretty cool because Sydney is a fantastic city to visit, I think. I was absolutely petrified of that flight. I certainly didn't sleep at all the night before for worrying about it. Possibly not knowing the destination wouldn't have actually aided that looking back. But anyway, that's what we did. And I got on that plane shaking and sat in the seat with my eyes closed, clutching my boyfriend's hand, probably nearly pulled it off, or at least gave him severe indents from my fingernails, who knows. But I made it. I didn't pass out. I managed to continue to breathe the whole way to Sydney. And I got to Sydney and I thought, wow, maybe I can actually do this travelling thing. Now, I don't remember much about that day in Sydney except for the fact that we went to the Sydney Tower. And of course, at the time, I was terribly afraid of heights. I was afraid of everything back then. And there was no way I could go up Sydney Tower. So I waited at the bottom while my boyfriend went up. And he said the view was great and took some pictures, which of course I couldn't see till later because this was pre-digital camera. But anyway, that was too much to go up Sydney Tower. But I remember, and we bought some earrings that I still have to this day. So I know that I definitely went on that trip. And then, of course, the same day I had to get on a plane again and fly home. And we were exhausted from walking around Sydney the whole day. And, of course, I hadn't had any sleep the night before. So I think that being so tired helped. And I didn't have the energy to completely freak out. And I even slept a little bit on the flight home, which is rare because I don't sleep well on planes. And all in all, that gave me the feeling that someday I could actually travel a bit further. And it also taught me that I needed to practice travelling as often as I could to deal with those fears. And so it's something I still do to this day, is to try and travel as much as I can, just to make sure that I don't feel too scared about it. But anyway, there might be others of you out there. In fact, I know that some travel bloggers I know have these kind of anxieties as well, because I thought that I was the only crazy one who kept travelling, even though it was so scary for me. But I am definitely not alone. I know that. And in fact, my first guest surprised me as well with her fears, because I think of her as a very brave solo woman traveller. But in fact, just like many of us, she has these fears as well. So I want to play part of our conversation. It's with Leyla, Giray, Alyanak. You might remember her from episode 2 with her very scary tales about getting lost. And you probably will be surprised, knowing her previous stories, to hear that she travels with a bunch of fears too, even though she is often a solo woman traveller.
Well, the reason I write a lot about solo travel for women is that traveling on my own pushes me way beyond my own comfort zone. And so this is how I learn. This is how I learn how to cope, because I am actually pretty scared all the time when I'm traveling. I'm very scared of land transport, and I'm scared of air transport.
Me too.
And I don't like water because I can't swim, and I almost drowned off Zanzibar once. So all these things actually scare me. And the only way I'm going to, get off my bum and get out there and see the world is if I push myself beyond those fears. So I have the fears. And pretty much anything I do, climbing a mountain, for example, I have vertigo, I'm scared of heights, you name it. Now, the important thing is not to let that stuff get in your way. Like, I had this wonderful coping mechanism in Kenyan matatus, those little Volkswagen buses into which, an average driver can fit in about 752 people and
Easy.
Whip through the Kenyan countryside, shrieking at the top of his voice. Very, very dangerous little things. So my coping mechanism for that one was, rather than try and hide in the back, I would sit in the front seat, the death seat, the passenger seat.
Are you crazy?
I would put my backpack. Yeah, no, hang on. I would put my backpack on my knees. My backpack was higher than my line of sight. Therefore, I couldn't see where we were going, and I could enjoy looking out the side. And I didn't have to worry about oncoming collisions, because if one did happen, it would happen so quickly I wouldn't know the difference. And that's how I learned how to enjoy my rides in those little buses that I took all across Africa for a year. That's how I cope with fear.
That's clever.
What you don't know won't hurt you.
Yes, and I'm
That's
imagining
my philosophy.
That your backpack might even have some kind of airbag kind of impact for you if there was a crash, perhaps.
Now, I hadn't thought of that. My backpack probably would not, because it had an early version laptop and lots of books.
Oh,
so
okay. No,
I'm
maybe
not
make
quite sure about the cushioning effect. Yeah. Very few clothes. But yes, I mean, the thing, I think that when you're traveling, a lot of things scare you. I mean, we are, I think, naturally as a species, afraid of differences and afraid of things that aren't familiar and things that we don't know. So it's absolutely natural when you're traveling someplace and you're different, you look different, you sound different, and the situation you're about to go into is different. It's very normal to be scared. I mean, you don't know how to cope, how to react. And all you find out is that things that you used to do at home that were perfectly normal are not only abnormal, but could be seen as rude or even dangerous in a different society. I mean, something as innocuous as wearing shorts. I mean, in some parts of the world, you do that and your life could be in danger, and most probably would be in danger. You have to cope with all these differences and learn how to react quickly to them. So fear, I think, is part of the whole travel thing. It's ingrained in a lot of what we do. And I think perhaps what happens is that, first of all, there is an age thing. Younger people tend to be less afraid about things than older people. I was not as afraid doing things in my 20s as I am now in my definitely more than 20s.
Yes.
So in my vastly further than my 20s. Okay, I'm 62. Let's just put that.
You're very honest of you.
But I look at things a little bit differently, perhaps because I have more to lose now, or maybe because I'm a little more aware of the dangers, whereas when I was younger and traveling, I wasn't that aware. So, the fears are there. They're different fears. When I was younger, it was more phobias. Now it's more fears. And the point is it should not keep you at home. I know people who don't go away, who don't travel, who don't do things because they're afraid. And that makes me very sad because, hey, we're all afraid in one way or another of something or another. I mean, aren't you afraid of anything when you travel?
Absolutely. I'm terrified of most things. So by nature, I have had a fairly anxious kind of lifestyle from time to time. And I was suffered badly from anxiety in my early 20s and decided to deal with that by moving overseas because I thought stupidly that somehow it would get better, and somehow it did. But I'm still very anxious about a lot of things when I travel, but I couldn't not travel. Like, it just seems it has to be the way to do it. It's interesting what you say about as you get older that the fears change, and that I've certainly noticed that. I used to sort of, if I was in a really anxiety provoking situation when I traveled, I would just think, okay, at least if I die here, I'm doing something I love doing. So that was kind of my justification. But now that I have a child, then that doesn't work anymore. So I pull back on things that I think could be risky. So definitely have a sort of a shift in my fears. But I hate flying. I'm terrified through most of any flight I'm on. And yet I still do it because I live in the world's most isolated city. And if I don't fly, I can't go anywhere, really. So, yeah, but I'm constantly surprised by how many other travellers feel the same kind of fears. It seems like we probably all should stay home, but somehow we don't, which is...
Absolutely. And not only that, but we've ended up working in travel. We're both travel writers. Look at that.
That's right. And I know quite a few other fellow travel writers who have, really serious anxiety problems and hate parts of the travelling, but still can't stop. So it's something that really gets into you and you just can't give it up, I think. It's really kind of amazing.
And also, I think it wears out. I mean, after a certain amount of time, you keep doing things that are fear-provoking. And, finally you get used to it. It doesn't mean that the fear goes away, but it's more like, okay, whatever.
I think
I'm terrified of water, but I still go into the water. And, once in a while I realize that I can't touch bottom and I have an instant of panic and quickly dog paddle back to where I can touch again. But it doesn't keep me from going into the water. It keeps me cautious and it keeps me careful. But, it doesn't stop me from doing it. And one of these days, who knows, I might learn how to swim.
But
all these things, I mean, I tried. It's fine. I can swim beautifully as long as I can touch bottom. The moment you tell me I can't touch bottom, I sink like a stone.
Isn't that funny?
And there's something that clicks, and all of a sudden I realize that, oh my God, I don't know how to swim, blub, 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 blub. Whereas if you tell me that when I can touch ground, then it's fine. I just say, oh yeah, but I'm not swimming. I'm just walking. You're absolutely right. But no, it's kind of hopeless. I mean, I saved my own life one day from drowning. This was in Zanzibar when I don't know what came into my mind, but sometimes you forget your fears. And I was with a group of friends and we're having a wonderful time. And they said, oh, look, there's a little rowboat. Why don't we just swim to there and back? And I looked at it and it was only a few feet away. And I thought, yeah, great. Let's swim out to the rowboat. And for a moment there, I knew how to swim. And we swam out to the rowboat and then turned around and they started swimming back. And I looked back at the shore and the shore had doubled in distance from the rowboat. I mean, the shore had moved. Hold on a second. I can't swim back there. So some tide must have come in or something. Yeah. And they were halfway back, and all of a sudden I panicked. I just panicked. I freaked out. I was holding on to the rowboat, and I thought, it didn't occur to me just to climb into the rowboat and wait for someone to rescue me someday. No, I had to go and try to get myself back to shore because that was the safe thing. Being on the water was not safe no matter what. So I tried to swim, with predictable results. This was not good. And I almost drowned. And then I remembered that if you lie on your back, you can float.
Yes.
So I tried that. I thought, well, this is my only chance because I kept running this thought through my head. if I panic, I will die. If I panic, I will die. I just kept running that through my head. So I kept breathing deeply, trying to relax on my back, paddle with my hands, and do all this that would, keep me alive, basically. Yeah. And next thing you know, I was on the shore. It actually made it.
That's impressive.
So, I literally saved my own life just by not panicking. But oh man, I never ever want to go through that one again.
No, I guess it must.
Now, when
be
somebody says let's swim, I go no.
No, I can't.
No.
So there you go, Leyla, who's travelled to all kinds of corners of the world in all kinds of crazy situations. She's sometimes scared. I feel really reassured by that, I have to say. And I feel a little bit better because I can actually swim. So I'm sort of one step safer. Who knows? Anyway, and my next guest is Bethaney Davies from Flashpacker family. And we got talking about sort of a similar issue about how many women, especially young women, feel really concerned or anxious about travelling alone. And I remember having the same feelings as Bethaney, that I'd always travelled with a friend or with a boyfriend, and I, for many years, didn't really believe that I could travel sort of independently but alone. There was all kinds of things I was scared about. Bethaney had the same experience, but I really like our chat about how she overcame that, and most importantly, what she learnt from that. And you might remember my short story from episode 0 about finding myself alone in the Zagreb train station in the middle of the night and learning pretty much the same lesson that Bethaney is going to describe in this chat.
Like, I think for me, the confidence to travel alone was something that I got in my 20s when I was traveling by myself, and I had always had relationships and been in like a long relationship, and it had ended. And I was living in London, and I was just like, no, that's it. I've got to get out of here. I've got to go. And really, it was kind of when Eat, Pray, Love had just come out. And everyone, you go through a breakup, so you're like, oh, I've got to go. I've got to find myself. But really, so I went off on this trip for 2 months by myself. And I went to Vietnam, and I went to Indonesia, and I went to a bunch of other places in Asia. And it really was just learning to be comfortable by myself, which was not a skill I had ever learned because I'd always had a boyfriend from the age of 15 or 16. I had just gone from boyfriend to boyfriend to boyfriend and never been by myself or learnt how to be my own person, really. So taking the plunge and going to travel by myself really kind of helped me realise that I'm capable and independent, and I really didn't need to have a man around,
Yeah, I know, yeah.
The other side of that was, I had been kind of relying on being a girl to excuse myself from lots of things, I wasn't super adventurous or athletic or anything like that. And I went on this trip and I literally just said yes to everything that came my way. It's like, oh, okay, we're going on a boat cruise of Halong Bay, and who wants to jump off the top of the boat into the water? Oh, okay, me, yes. I would never have done that.
I still wouldn't ever do that.
But, I just let myself be really open to experiences and saying yes to things that I wouldn't normally do or would have given myself the excuse before. I was, oh, no, I'll let my boyfriend do that, or, whatever. Just being open to say yes to things.
How did you reach that place in your mind where you were able to be so open to saying yes to things? Was it a struggle to decide to go on a solo trip and have to learn all that stuff, or did you just jump?
I just jumped, but the first week I probably spent alone and cried in my hotel room and what am I doing? And, I should really just change my ticket and go straight home and go back and live at my mum's house in New Zealand. I thought, no, I really have to stick to it, especially because of, Facebook had just started. So I'd already kind of announced, yes, I'm going on this trip for 2 months. And I really felt like I couldn't back out of it. And I just had to go for it. So I got over my sadness and fear and all this, it took about a week for me to work out that I was actually, I could survive on my own. I didn't need anyone else. And part of that was because I went to Vietnam and had that really great experience with meeting a local person and, you know, having a friend for a week.
Right.
And yeah, and it just gave me the confidence to keep going and keep trying new things. Yeah, just to really learn how to be my own person.
Yeah.
And not to have to rely on anyone else, which I had never done, ever.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like I'd travelled before, but I'd always had that safety net of having travelled with a guy or travelled with a friend, or, you know, it's really hard to be by yourself and to learn to not be lonely in your own company.
Yeah, it's hard to learn, but it's really valuable to learn, isn't it?
Yeah, like, and to be able to sit down and eat a meal by yourself and not feel embarrassed. It's a really big thing.
Yeah, yes, that's true. One of the lessons is in caring less about what other people think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like now I think, oh my God, it was so silly to worry about that kind of thing. You know, I used to always have a plan of like, okay, I've got a book or a Sudoku or something I can do so I don't look like a loser sitting by myself. And at one point I was in a hotel room and I was like chatting to a friend online. I was saying, look, I'm so lonely right now. And he's like, well, you're not going to feel any less alone by sitting in a hotel room by yourself. You need to go and just sit out in a bar or sit out in a restaurant and just, you know, you have no chance of being less lonely sitting out somewhere in public by yourself than you do sitting at home alone talking to someone on the computer. So get your butt out there, sit on a seat, order a drink, and just sit there until someone comes by and talk to them and, you know, try and make friends. And just little things like that really give you confidence.
Yeah, for sure. And it's sort of like, yes, baby steps, and it all adds up to feeling that, you can do anything. So,
yeah. I mean, and now being like a mother and never having a second by myself, like what I wouldn't give to just go and sit in a restaurant by myself.
I know.
And have a drink and have no one touch me or talk to me, and I wouldn't feel lonely. I would feel so happy.
Yes, absolutely. You certainly wouldn't feel like people might think you were a loser. You wouldn't care at all. Yes, different phases of life. But it's really interesting how you talk about, you know, not having, you're always relying on like a boyfriend or a friend or something, because I was the same when I travelled. And actually in the episode 0 of the podcast, I told a story about a similar kind of moment where I realised I could go do anything by myself and go anywhere, and it was actually kind of really eye-opening to realise that. And I think it's something you never lose after that. Then you always have this kind of sort of base level of confidence is higher.
You only need to do it once, and then you really become so much less fearful or ashamed even of being alone. And it was, you know, it was a really like, and from then on, like, people always said to me, oh, you're so brave, like, I can't believe you go and do all this stuff by yourself, and don't you get lonely, or don't you like worry about your personal safety? And just like, no, because I know that I'm like, I can do anything by myself now. I would literally be fine.
I was actually really glad to hear about Bethaney's experience and how closely it parallels some of my travel experiences too. And I love that she agrees with me that travel really gives you that feeling you can do anything. That's why we need to get everyone to travel more, I think. So anyway, thanks so much for listening to episode 5 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. And as always, a huge thanks to my guests. Today I had Leyla, Giray, Alyanak, and you'll find Leyla at www.womenontheroad.com. She has a massive site there with pretty much everything a woman needs to know to travel solo. Lots of amazing tips and advice. And of course also Bethaney Davies from flashpackerfamily.com. Actually, Bethaney and I bonded quite a few years ago over Twitter when we discovered that we had both given our sons the same name. So how could we not be mates? And we did get to meet at a pro blogger conference a couple of years back, and I'm hoping to catch her again this year. But at flashpackerfamily.com you'll find lots of great family travel advice. They've been travelling full-time for a while now and really do a good job of it, and also have lots of tips for budget travel so that you can basically travel forever and it's cheaper than living at home, which sometimes sounds really tempting. Anyway, as always, these details and more will be in the show notes. And for this episode, you'll find the show notes at notaballerina.com/05. Just before I go, a big thanks to Christy, Joe and Jane, who have all left really lovely reviews on iTunes. I would love it if you could leave a rating or a review too if you've been enjoying the Thoughtful Travel podcast. You can get in touch with me on Twitter at Amanda Kendall. Use the hashtag ThoughtfulTravelPod, or you can look me up at Not a Ballerina on Facebook. I look forward to talking to you again soon. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.
Jackrabbit FM. For your ears.
Who is that? Hi, Podcast.